Brachot, chapter 7, Mishnah Aleph. 7th chapter, first Mishnah. פרק זה עוסק בהלכות הזימון לברכת המזון. We're going to be dealing with the laws of Zimmon. After you finish ברכת המזון, after you finish benching for food, davening for food, the laws for Zimmon, who can join, who cannot join, and so on and so forth. משנתנו בא ללמד, our Mishnah comes to teach us, מתי חייבים בזימון? When are you obligated to make a zimmon? ומי הם המצטרפים לזימון? And who can join this concept called the zimmon? So let's see. שלושה שאכלו כאחד, if there's three people that ate together, ביחד, חייבים לזמן. They have an obligation to make a zimmon. What does it mean to make a zimmon? לברך ברכת הזימון קודם ברכת המזון. To add a special blessing called the blessing of Zimmon before they do the regular birkat hamazon for food, for bread. When they make the davening, their special bracha for food itself. דהיינו, what does it mean? שאחד מזמין את חבריו לברכה, one of the people is going to invite all the other friends to make a blessing, ואומר להם, and he says to them, נברך שאכלנו משלו. Let's bless the one who we ate from his. כמבואר להלן במשנה ג', just like it is going to be explained later on in the third Mishnah. בגמרא למדים זה מן הכתוב, in the Gemara we learn this from what it's written in Tehillim ל"ד, גדלו להשם איתי ונרמה שמו יחדיו. It says, let's make God great together with me, and let's raise his great name together. אחד אומר לרבים, so one of the people says to the many, גדלו, let's raise God up, ומיעוט רבים שניים. And when you have plural, the list of the plural means at least two. So from here we have harei shlosha. From here we learn that at least three people, that's the minimum of Zimmon. Or there's another opinion. Some say you don't learn it from that verse, but you learn from a different verse. Which is the other verse you're learning from? Or min hakatuv, or from another verse, from Dvarim Lamed Bet Gimel, which is Dvarim 32nd chapter Mishnah Gimel. Over there it says, Ki Shem Hashem Ekra, because the name of God I will call, Havu Godel Elokeinu. Let's give greatness to our God. Up to here. Achal demai. What happened if a person eats demai? Now, what is demai? Demai is like this. Amei haaretz, the simple people who live in the land, חשודים היו על המעשרות. We were worried they did not tithe correctly. שכן רבים מהם היו מקלים על עצמם, because many of them were lenient on themselves, ולא היו מפרישים מתבואותם ומפירותיהם, and they wouldn't tithe from their grain or from their fruits, לא מעשר ראשון ולא מעשר שני. They wouldn't tithe the first tithe, neither they would tithe the second tithe. לפיכך קבעו חכמים, therefore the sages have established, שהתבואה והפירות של עמי הארץ, that when you take grain, or the grain and the fruits of the simple folk, demai hem, they're considered to be demai. Demai is like, what are they? We're not sure. We have doubt whether it was tithed or not. כלומר, ספק מאושרים, which means we have doubt whether they were tithed. פירוש המילה demai, what does it mean, the word demai? Demai. This one, what is it? זה מהו. We're not sure what it is. מאוסר או לא מאוסר? Was it tithed or wasn't it tithed? כך מבארים רוב מפרשי המשנה. This is the explanation of the majority of the people of the Mishnah. ויש מפרשים, there are other who explain, דמאי מלשון דימוי והרהור. דמאי, it means we are wondering about it. שיש להרהר אחר תבואה זו, that you have to wonder after this kind of produce. אם הפרישו מעשרותיה, אם לאו, if they already gave away the tithing or not. ויש מבארים, there's another people who explain, another opinion, שהיא מילה יוונית, that demai is a word in Old Greek, which means diamos. And it means diamos. What does diamos means in Old Greek? Umuvana. It means am, hamon. It means the multitudes, the nation, the simple people. Or folks. Hainu, tvua shel hamon ha'am. It means the grain of the regular folks, of the folks. Omnam, but, רוב עמי הארץ היו מעשרים. It was true that the minority of the people would not tithe, but the majority would tithe. אבל חכמים חששו כאן, but over here, the elders are warning, למיעוט, they are worried about the minority. Even though usually we don't are worried about the minority, over here we are going to worry about a minority. הואיל והוא מיעוט המצוי הרבה. How come? Because it wasn't just a small minority. The minority was quite a few. והתקינו שהלוקח תבואה ופירות מעם הארץ. So therefore the sages made it established that if you take grains or fruits from regular folks, הרי הם דמאי, you have to consider them of you don't know if they were tithe or not. וחייב להפריש מהם, so you now have to tithe from them. מספק תרומת מעשר ומעשר שני. You have to tithe, the two tithing that we are worried that they didn't tithe. כמבואר להלן במסכת דמאי, like we're going to learn further on in the tractate that belongs to דמאי. משנתנו בא להשמיע, our Mishnah comes to teach us, להלן בספר, we're going to see that in the end, שכל האוכל דבר האסור באכילה, that if you are eating something that you are forbidden to be eaten, או האוכל פחות מכזית, or that if you're eating less than the allotted amount, which is olive, או מי שאינו ישראלי, or somebody who is not a Jew, אין לצרפו לזימון. We do not enjoin him together to make the Zimmon. ברם, but, ברישא מונה המשנה אנשים שמזמנים עליהם. In the beginning, the Mishnah is talking about people that we do enjoined, put together to make a Zimmon. אף על פי שיש, כן איסור באכילתם או פגם בעצמם. Even though, as we're going to see, it looks like there's a prohibition in their eating, or there's a prohibition, there's something wrong in them themselves. וזהו ששנינו, and this is what we said, אכל דמאי, a person who ate דמאי, ולא הפריש ממנו את המעשרות, and even though he did not take away, he did not tithe the tithing, the allotted tithing from that specific produce, מותר לצרפו לזימון. We are allowed, if we have, even though we have doubt, we are allowed to bring him and join us for the Zimmon. Why? שהואיל ורוב עמי הארץ מעשרים הם, that since the majority of the nation did tithe, כמו שהזכרנו לעיל, like we explained above, לא הכבירו חכמים. The sages were not so strict when it comes to them. משום הספק לעניין צירפו לזימון. When it comes to enjoining him. So you're not allowed to eat the food, but he can do the benching with you. ואומנם מטעם זה הקלו חכמים בדמאי לגבי העניים. So we're going to learn later on, in דמאי, even though you're not sure they were tithed, you're allowed to give it to the poor. ואמרו, and they said, מאכילים את העניים דמאי. It says you're allowed to give the poor people דמאי. ומעשר, same thing. What about ומעשר ראשון? What about if the first tithing, שנתלה תרומתו, that its truma was taken. Now, what is the case we are talking about over here? So it's like this. סדר הפרשת התרומה והמעשרות. So there's a specific way one would give truma and tithing, מן התבואה והפירות, from the produce or from the grains or the fruits. ככה, this is the way it's supposed to be done. בתחילה מפרישים תרומה גדולה. In the beginning you would give a truma, a tithing called תרומה גדולה, the big truma, and this is 1 out of 50, 2%, and that will go to the Kohen. And that will go to the Kohen. ואין חייבים בה אלא לאחר מירוח הקרי בגורן. You only have obligated to give it after all the grain is in the silo and you are making the silo straight in the top, which means it's ready for storage already. לאחר שמחליקים ומיישרים את הרימת התבואה בגמר הדישה והזריעה. After you make it straight in the silo, after all the work that was done to the grain. לאחר הפרשת התרומה, so after you give this 2% to the Kohen, מפרישים מן הנשאר, so you've got 98% left. So from that 98% you have to tithe again, מעשר ראשון, this is called the first tithing, אחד מעשרה, and that's 10%, which means 9.8% from whatever was in the beginning. And who do you give that to? You give that to the Levi. אחרי מעשר ראשון, מפרישים מעשר שני. After the first tithing, you will give the second tithing. And what is the second tithing? מעלים אותו או דמי פדיונו לירושלים. You will take that second, whatever 10% from whatever was done, you will take that fruits or that grain to Yerushalayim and you will eat it in Yerushalayim. והלוי, and the Levi, he got 10%, אף הוא מפריש מן המעשר שניתן לו חלק עשירי לכהן. So even though he got 10%, the Levi needs to give 10% to the Kohen. וזהו הנקרא תרומת מעשר. And this is what's called תרומת מעשר. Or it's called מעשר מן המעשר, or it's called a tithe from the tithe. That's the 10% that the Levi gives from his tithing to the Kohen. משנתנו בא ללמד, so our Mishnah comes to teach us, שאם אכל אדם, that if a person ate, מעשר ראשון שנתלה תרומתו, he took the first tithing that was already, the tithing was taken, תרומת המעשר, the tithing, אף על פי שלא נתלה ממנו תרומה גדולה. In other words, it was done out of order. First, you should have gave it to the Kohen. But over here, the Levi gave first, כגון שהקדים הלוי ליטול את מעשרו בשיבולים קודם שנטל ממנו הכהן תרומה גדולה. In other words, you were supposed to give to the Kohen first, but instead of going to the Kohen first, the Levi came first, and he took his 10%. הרי הוא מצטרף לזימון. So even though he was not supposed to do that, nevertheless, you can enjoin such a Levi and eat with him for the Zimmon. שהואיל וקיבל הלוי את המעשר בשיבולים, since the Levi received the tithing in stocks, קודם שנתחייבה התבואה בתרומה. In other words, he took it before the whole job was finished for the Kohen to take it, because the Kohen can only take his produce after all the process has been done with the storage. And the Levi over here came and took his part before the process was finished. כמו שביארנו לעיל, like we explained above, הרי הוא פטור מלהפריש ממנו תרומה גדולה. Now he doesn't need to give from it תרומה גדולה. 2% to the Kohen, שכתוב והרימתם ממנו תרומת השם. How come? Because it says you have to raise from it a truma to God. What do you mean from it? ממעשר מן המעשר. A tithe of the tithe. מעשר מן המעשר, ולא תרומת גדולה ותרומת מעשר מן המעשר. It has to be a tithe from the Levi, and not תרומה גדולה, תרומת מעשר מן המעשר. Over here, the Kohen didn't get it, so therefore, it doesn't apply to it. Next one. ומעשר שני, also the second tithe, והקדש שנפדו. And produce that was given to the temple that you bought back. So let's explain these two. כבר הזכרנו למעלה, we already mentioned, שמעשר שני, that what do you have to do with the second tithe? דינו לעלותו לירושלים לאכלו שם. You have to bring it up to Jerusalem and to eat him in Jerusalem. But אם קשה לאדם לעלות את פירות המעשר לירושלים, what happens if he lives far away from ירושלים? And to take all the fruits to Yerushalayim, 10% of the fruits, that's very hard. הרי הוא פודה אותם בכסף. So what can he do? He can sell them on the market. And then he takes the money, ומעלה דמי הפדיון לירושלים, and he takes that money that he sold it in the market, he takes that money to ירושלים, ומוציאם שם על דברי אכילה ושתייה. And in ירושלים, he can spend the money on food and eat. He has to spend it specifically on food or on drinks, or wine or things like this, or oil, but he cannot buy other stuff, but he has to spend the money on food and drink in Jerusalem itself. לאחר שנפדו הפירות של מעשר שני, so it says, after the fruits of the second tithing were already bought, in other words, you already exchanged them with money, מותר לו לאכלם בכל מקום. He's allowed to eat them even if he's in באר שבע, out of ירושלים, even if he's far away from ירושלים. וכן דבר שהוקדש להשם, also things that you designated it as a donation to God, or to the temple, אפשר לפדותו בכסף. You can sell that thing and get money for it. והוא יוצא לחולין. And that particular object becomes yours again. And you take the money and you give the money donation to the temple. בכסף הפדיון נקרא הקדש. And the holiness of the sacrifice, so called, now is transferred to the money, and that money belongs to the temple. ברם, but we have a special rule. הפודה מעשר שני, when you buy the fruits of the second מעשר, וכן הפודה הקדשו, or you donated something to the temple, and then you buy it, you sell it and you take the money, צריך להוסיף חומש על דמי פדיונו. You need to add 1/5 on its value. ובא משנתנו להשמיע. And our Mishnah comes to teach us, שאם אכל פירות מעשר שני, that if you ate the fruits of the second tithing, או הקדש שנפדו, or a donation that you donated to the temple and you bought it back, even though there is אף על פי שפטעום ללא תוספת החומש, you were supposed to give 1/5 extra to the temple because you used their money, you used their product, it's almost like a penalty, yeah? So you're supposed to add 1/5. אין החומש מעכב ומצטרף הוא לזימון. The chumash, the addition that you have to add to the produce does not prevent you from joining the zimun. Up to here. Next case. השמש שאכל כזית. What happened about the waiter who is doing his waiter job, and he ate at least the allotted amount, which is a kezait. השמש המשבש את המסובים. The waiter who serves all the people who are gathered, אף על פי שאין מקומו קבוע אצל השולחן, even though he's not sitting with you, he's not eating with you at the same table. אם אכל מזון כשהוא זין, nevertheless, if he ate at least a certain measurement during the meal as he's serving you, then he can join the zimun. Vehakuti, or the person is a kuti. Now, what is a kuti? A kuti is a Jew that we're not quite sure about his status. Let's explain. Min hagoim shehevi melech Ashur. This is from the nations that the king of Ashur, from a place called Kuta, were brought, umish'ar ha'aratzot. They were brought in as laborers or whatever from other countries, vehoshivam b'shumron, and he placed them in the Shomron, in a geographical area called Shomron in the land of Israel. And what happened? Even though they were not Jews, but nidgairu, they all converted to Judaism, but not because they really wanted to become Jews. It was because me'eimat ha'arayot, it happened that the lions at the time used to devour them, used to hunt them out. And they thought that it is a punishment from them not being Jewish. He says, let's be like the inhabitants of the land. Maybe the lions are not going to attack us now. שהיו טורפים רבים מהם, those lions ate many of them, כמסופר בספר מלכים ב' פרק י"ז, just like it told us in the book of Kings, second chapter, the book of Kings, number 2, chapter 17. וכתוב בהם, and it's written in them, את השם היו יראים, they were kind of in between. They were afraid of God in one hand, but nevertheless, at psilehem hayu ovdim, they were still worshipping idols. Beram, but כל מצווה שהחזיקו בה היו מדקדקים בה יותר מישראל. But the commandments that they did do, they used to do them even better than the Jews. So כל אלה, so these, even though we had a question about if they converted for the right reason or not converted for the right reason, nevertheless, all of these people, מזמנים עליהם, they do join with our Zimmon. מצטרפים לשלושה שחייבים לזמן. They become enjoined, they join the three that are obligated to make a Zimmon. כמו שביארנו כבר למעלה בכל אחת מהם, like we explained already above. But we're going to talk about the times that we don't enjoin them, that they cannot join a Zimmon. אבל אכל תבל, if a person ate תבל, now what is תבל? תבואה שלא הופרשו מן התרומה ומעשרות. This is produce that you know for sure wasn't tithed. Not like the dmai that you're not sure if it was. This one you know for sure it wasn't tithed. ואפילו תבל מדרבנן. And even though if it was תבל just from the rabbis, not from the Torah. ומעשר ראשון שלא נתלה תרומתו, or first tithing that you didn't take its tithing yet, אין צורך לומר במעשר ראשון שלא נתלה ממנו תרומת המעשר. For sure it's first tithing that was not taking from it the truma for the tithing. שהרי תבל גמור, like we explained before, this is for sure תבל. אלא כוונת המשנה היא, over here the Mishnah comes to tell you, even in a case, לפי הגמרא, שלא נתלה ממנו תרומה גדולה. That you didn't take the תרומה גדולה, the 2% to the coin. For example, how? כגון שהקדים הלוי לאחר מרוח הקרי. In the previous case, the Levi took it before the Kohen can take it, because the work wasn't done together with the produce. Over here, the Levi is taking it after it already has the obligation to give it to the Kohen. Therefore, דהיינו לאחר שנתחייבה התבואה בתרומה. It's after this produce already is obligated in tithing to the Kohen. And then נטל הלוי את המעשר קודם שהפרישו ממנו תרומה גדולה. In such a case, when the Levi took the tithe before you designated the תרומה גדולה for the Kohen, והרי בכל גון זה חייב הלוי להפריש ממעשרו, לא רק תרומת מעשר. Now the Levi has to take from his 10% that he got from the regular Jew, not only 10% to the Kohen, אלא גם תרומה גדולה. He has to give him the תרומה גדולה that the Kohen didn't get yet. וכל זמן שלא הפריש מן התרומה גדולה, אסור לאכלו. And as long as he's not going to separate the truma that the Kohen should have gotten first, he's not allowed to eat it. So therefore, if he eats such a produce, he cannot join the Zimmon. ומעשר שני והקדש שלא נפדו. Also the same thing about second tithing or a donation, הקדש, that you gave to the temple that you did not buy back. אפילו אם נפדו, אלא שנפדו שלא כהלכתם. Even if they were bought back, but they weren't bought back the right way. For example, what does it mean not buying back the right way? כגון מעשר שני שפדעו באסימון. The example he's going to give you here is second tithing that you bought it in an asimon. Now, what's an asimon? Usually the money they had at the time had a specific value. It was made out of silver or out of gold, so you can weigh it and see how much it weighs. An asimon is a representative. It doesn't have any value. It does. If you weigh it, it's not worth anything as its own, because it's not made out of silver, neither it's made out of gold. It says matbea she'en alea tzura. An asimon is a coin without, in other words, the value changes. It's like it's like stamps over here in America that even when the prices goes up, it stays the same price. This is what an asimon is. והקדש שחיללו על גבי קרקע, or donation, הקדש, that you bought it through ground, ולא בתאו בכסף, and you did not get it, you don't buy it back with money, שבכל גון זה אין פדיונם פדיונם. In such a cases, we're not calling it that you took it out of the holiness of the temple over here. You did not buy them back. Or another case that the person cannot enjoin the Zimmon, והשמש שאכל פחות מכזית, if the waiter ate less than the olive. והוא הדין לכל מי שאכל פחות מכזית. We're not talking about just the waiter. Anybody who ate less than a כזית cannot eat, cannot join the Zimmon. אלא שהמשנה נקנה שמש, the reason, so why does the Mishnah says the waiter? אגב הרישא, because it's already mentioned the waiter in the beginning of the Mishnah. והנוכרי, and any non-Jew, לא רק גוי ממש, not just real non-Jew, אלא אפילו גר, שמל ולא טבל, even a convert that circumcised himself, but he didn't go to the mikveh yet. ולא טבל, he did not go to the mikveh. שכל זמן שלא טבל, that as long as he did not go to the mikveh, הרי הוא חשוב כנוכרי. We consider him like a non-Jew. כל אלה, all of these mentioned above, אין מזמנים עליהם, we do not make zimmon on them, אינם מצטרפים לזימון. We cannot join them into the zimmon.